Hello again, everyone. I'm Tom Nagorski, managing editor at the Cipher Brief, where today we're looking at a fundamental question. Should Donald Trump meet with Vladimir Putin, the Russian leader? And a lot of questions that flow out of that one. This is not some random hypothetical question anymore. The president has said a meeting is being set up in the near future as part of his administration's effort to bring a swift end to the war in Ukraine. Joined today by John McLaughlin, Cipher Brief expert, former acting CIA director, one of the great students and scholars and minds when it comes to all kinds of global affairs. John, it's great to have you with us. And, the Biden administration refused pretty steadfastly from the first days of the 2022 invasion of Ukraine to not only not meet with Vladimir Putin, but I think they were in those early days very careful to be sure that President Biden did not sort of run into President Putin at a global gathering. So just to start with that basic question, good idea or bad idea for Donald Trump at this moment to go meet wherever it happens the Russian leader?
Well, if I'm true to my own written recommendations in previous cases, I would say we shouldn't rule it out. We shouldn't be totally against it. I've written in the past and taken criticism for the idea that we should probably not shy away from meeting with adversaries. Now, Putin, however, is in a special case. I mean, he's not just an adversary. He's someone who has physically invaded. He's aggressively invaded another country, and so far not been all that impressed with our efforts to discourage that or punish it. So he's in a special category. But I guess I would say, if the president wants to do this, he's probably going to do it. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say it's a totally bad idea because there's merit in understanding Putin better. But big, lots of caveats here. The first thing is this will be just getting a meeting with the American president would be a gift to Putin. It'd be a big win for him because this war has made him, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, somewhat of a pariah. He's still received in some parts of Latin America and the Middle East, of course, but in terms of our allies and the countries that are closest to him, except for China and North Korea, he's a pariah. So this would be, in a way, getting out of the penalty box just to meet with the American president. So it's a gift, and in return for a gift, the American president ought to get something before this even starts. Yeah. In terms of what that should be, that would take me to my second point. Putin is a KGB case officer. He's a trained recruiter of other human beings. And the president is not. President Trump, I think, is feeling a great deal of confidence right now, as he should. And I don't know him, but I have a sense that he thinks he is able to walk in and be as manipulative and effective with a human being that he's sitting across from as I think Putin is. Mm-hmm. I would be skeptical of that. And I don't mean that critically of President Trump. I would say it about any president going to meet Putin. Mm-hmm. So what's that take you to? It takes you to know in advance what you want at the end. Putin will know that. He will not come in improvisationally. So on the American side, Trump would have to know, what do I want at the end of this very clearly? Second, such a meeting ought to be prepared by Trump's advisors. He shouldn't go anywhere near Putin until a number of people who work for him, it could be his Secretary of State, it could be his National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, it could be someone lower level, but someone who is credible with Putin and whom Putin knows has access to the president. Before the president gets anywhere near Putin. All of that should be prepared in advance. And if they're going to issue a communique or anything like that, that should be worked out in advance, not while the president is in Putin's presence or within 24 hours of him. That implies, of course, that you know what you're trying to get and that you're willing to not have the meeting if it appears you're not going to get that. Now,
Right.
Sometimes presidents go to meetings and their job is to close something that isn't quite closed yet.
Right.
Trump would feel confident that he could do that, but I would not try that with Putin. Third point, we shouldn't do this, the president shouldn't do this, and this would be a hard one for him to swallow, I think, without close consultation with our NATO allies, and particularly the frontline states, and of course, with Ukraine itself. In other words, Zelensky should be on the same page as President Trump before President Trump meets with Putin.
Mm-hmm.
Because who has more at stake in this than the Ukrainians? And the Ukrainians are not doing badly. Putin is not in some winning position here. He's lost or had injured, somewhere around 600,000 people. He's had to draw on North Korean troops. This is not something someone would do if they were fully confident of their reserve capability and their ability to mobilize. So Putin is not in a very strong position here. So the Ukrainians need to be involved in any decision that the president is going to make. And then finally, we'd have to think through, what is it you want? And again, I can't read President Trump's mind here, but it seems to me the overarching strategic goal would be some security for Ukraine beyond this agreement, whatever agreement is reached. It doesn't have to mean that Putin withdraws completely from Ukraine. It could mean that Zelensky agrees to cede some of the territory that Putin has taken, but in return for assurances of sovereignty and security on the bulk of Ukraine. That's not the preferred outcome, of course, but if realistically that's all that's left after the fighting and negotiating is over, a lot of people have suggested that's the logical way for this to end. But then the tough point is, how do you see their security after that?
Right.
It could be a series of bilateral agreements between the United States and Ukraine, Germany and Ukraine, Poland and Ukraine, other European countries and Ukraine. Putin would see through this pretty quickly and realize that's not NATO membership, but it is the military equivalent of it, and maybe stronger in some ways because it wouldn't require necessarily unanimous consent as NATO intervention would. Of course, NATO membership would be the ideal outcome. I don't know that the president would be willing to go that far, but if he was, that would be the ideal outcome. But short of that, then some kind of security arrangement that would rely more on bilateral arrangements, because if you don't have the allies involved in this and something goes bad, well, we're kind of on our own. So I think it would be foolish to go in without some kind of at least prior consultation, if not complete unity on every sentence or every idea. Mm-hmm. But not surprise the allies, not surprise Ukraine.
We do know, I think, that General Kellogg, Trump's special envoy for the war, has been to Europe. He's presumably had some of those talks already. But just as a general matter here, because we also know Donald Trump is not one to necessarily stand on ceremony or the usual way things are done, or maybe even read missives from someone like yourself who might someone else in a position that may be advising him now. What's the downside and the danger here specifically with Putin if any number of those things are not done? If the sorting out what you want, if the preparation with the allies, if any of those are not followed through, what worries you?
Well, what would worry me is that the United States would agree to a negotiated settlement to the war without firm security guarantees for Ukraine, and there would be a temptation to do that. Mm-hmm. It would be a great temptation to declare victory and step away from this. The danger of that is that my conviction, and can't be proven, but my conviction based on following the Russians for a long time and listening to Europeans, is that he would come at Ukraine again once he had rebuilt, and we would be right back in the same awful decision box that he put us into by invading Ukraine. And moreover, that he would be tempted, without some kind of security guarantees for Ukraine, to seek some kind of provocation with regard to the Baltics or some of the frontline states like Poland or the Czech Republic, probably the Baltic states where there is a large Russian population that, to my knowledge, is not interested in affiliating with Russia, but which he may think he may use as an excuse for Crimean-like provocations there. And all of the Europeans are afraid of this. They're more than afraid of it. The last time, this was a year ago, but hopefully I'm going to be at the Munich conference again this year. I'll see what they think. But last year, this was not a matter of debate, as we've discussed before. They were convinced that if Putin prevails in Ukraine, he's coming across at them. So that's the danger if we go into this in an improvisational way and accept something that feels good at the moment but doesn't assure Ukraine's security. And, remember the president came back from North Korea pretty much convinced that the North Koreans were going to back away from nuclear weapons, and they didn't.
Yeah.
So perhaps he took something from that and said, I won't do it that way again.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing I'd worry about is that I think the president right now is feeling very confident about himself and his own powers. And this is not a real estate deal. It's not a typical bargain, I don't think, not with Putin.
One thing, just to tip maybe on the balance slightly to the other direction in terms of how he may approach this. And again, we're reading tea leaves. First of all, General Kellogg is a seasoned guy, and he has made clear that there are going to be, in his view anyway, some strictures placed and some demands made of the Russian leader. And also, we heard just the other day, President Trump himself, in some of his first comments about Russia, was very critical of Vladimir Putin, something I don't think we heard at all during the campaign, but he's chosen this moment to say, he's doing a lot of bad things, things aren't going well, so on and so forth. Any of that give you any more hope that whatever happens in the things we've been talking about will go better?
A little. As I said a moment ago, this is Trump 2, the second Trump, and he's had a lot of time to reflect on things he did the first time around, and on something like the negotiations, the meetings with Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader. People say he's looking for a Nobel Peace Prize. This would be one way to compete for that, but I think it would not go to him unless this was an agreement that constrained Putin to the satisfaction of the people who award the Nobel Peace Prize, who happen to be frontline states. So a lot of things come together here to raise the hope that he will think of Putin a little differently than he did the first time around. Everyone recalls, of course, his seeming mystification when confronted by reporters with the idea that Putin might have interfered in the election. And I remember him saying, I don't know why he would do that. Right. Well, that's still debated, but I think it's pretty clear the Russians at some level tried to interfere in the election. So maybe he's absorbed that. Although, again, this is a neuralgic issue with him because he continues to think of it as a hoax. And also, we don't know the nature of his relationship with Putin. And I don't mean to suggest anything illicit or clandestine. I just mean that when he met with Putin before, as I understand it, there's no real record of that. Mm-hmm. So we don't really know what kind of personal chemistry there is.
Right.
what they might have talked about, what kind of, leaders, when they do this, there's a residue of, they both remember something. And, actually, as I recall, just to go slightly sideways here, Putin did have, as I remember, one meeting with Biden since Biden was president. I don't remember
He did in
when,
2021. Yeah.
21. And after that meeting, what Putin said was something along the lines of, he was pretty good, Biden. He was on top of his game. So Putin, and I think Putin kind of meant it in the sense that I'm sure Biden went in with well prepared. He was at that moment, I think, still quite together and prepared. I think Putin, he can respect someone who's done the work,
Right.
and who comes well prepared. Now, we're talking about this as though Putin's just another senior bad guy we're going to maybe meet with, but we really have to, at the end of the day, say, no, no, no. Remember, he did an awful thing here. He broke all the rules. He broke all the rules. That's why you'll remember from some of the first things we did together on Russia, the point I was trying to make then was the shock of it was that this was never supposed to happen again.
Well, and you, I mean, the one thing we haven't said, he's an indicted war criminal.
And he's an indicted war criminal. So,
John, if I can ask you,
so he's not the normal bad
yeah.
leader. He's a pariah, an indicted war criminal, and all of that. So, I was just beginning to think as we were discussing it, oh, well, we're starting to talk about this like this is all normal, but it isn't. It's extraordinary.
Speaking of extraordinary, and before we go, you've mentioned Kim Jong-un and the North Koreans a couple of times in this conversation, and we'll remember those summits that Trump had with him. And, there is, Donald Trump has, with a lot of things, a penchant for doing things in an out-of-the-box, not traditional, to say the least, way. Is there, when would you say there is a utility to that kind of approach to global diplomacy, whether here or any, in other words, break the glass, throw out the rules, sit down with the bad guy or bad woman du jour and do things that maybe the longtime diplomats would say not a good idea?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think even for the longtime diplomats would agree that there's value in diplomacy in ambiguity. I mean, after all, for years our whole approach to Taiwan has been based on, until mostly based on the whole concept of strategic ambiguity.
Right.
And so, to the extent that a leader can keep others guessing about where they're going, I don't quite subscribe to the man-band theory, the idea that if someone acts a little crazy, people will be afraid of them and not do anything we don't want them to do. I don't quite buy that, but the idea of ambiguity, yes, of course, there is value to that. Yes.
Yeah, sometimes. Huh? And I should ask you, you said in your opening answer that you have, I don't know if you want to share, that you have advised presidents in the past to meet or not to meet with. You want to share an example or two before we?
No, I don't recall advising a president to do that, but I do recall writing about that at some point in the last 10 years or so. And I remember I think it was the Wall Street Journal editorial board thought I was crazy to suggest meeting, and it might have been with Kim Jong-un at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Would have been in the maybe Obama era, or recall that in the Clinton administration, toward the end of that administration, Madeleine Albright had done a series of meetings with Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il,
right.
And the Clinton administration felt they were getting close to an agreement on limitation of long-range missiles. And they were very close to authorizing that President Clinton actually meet with Kim Jong-il. And I think it might have been at that time that I was thinking about it. I was still in government, but I wasn't writing about it. But I think that's what left me with the feeling that if you can if you can prepare the way that Madeleine Albright, I think, made two trips over there, and I knew Madeleine Albright well. She was not a pushover for these people. She's probably tougher than any of them. If you can prepare the way so that you know what you're going to get, and you have allies locked up on it, it's not a bad idea. I guess the thing I would worry about with President Trump is he's very confident, and I think he believes he can. I don't know him, but I think he believes he can walk into a room, sit down with people, understand them, kind of like a case officer, and move them to his position. And I don't think that's how you deal with Putin. He's not very strong right now, but he's also very savvy, shrewd, kind of a feral character, and very much defending what he sees as Russian interests. So he's not a nice guy.
All right. We're going to have to leave it there. John McLaughlin, great to have you with us. Always appreciate your insights. And maybe we can rerun a conversation or have a new one once there actually has been a meeting or something fresh on this subject. But we really appreciate it.
Who knows? Maybe the president will listen to this and do exactly what we say.
All right, John. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate your joining us.
Thank you, Tom. Bye.